Well, it's a very nice opportunity to say that the world has changed. We have a Java conference provided by Microsoft, and we have Red Hat speaking here. And today is such a joy to be here because I'll be talking about some of my favorite projects. I'll be talking about VS Code. I'll be talking about the Java plugin for VS Code, the Quarkus plugin for VS Code. I'll be talking about Azure, Red Hat OpenShift, and Quarkus. Can't get better than that. So thank you very much for coming. We'll be discussing all of these subjects, and just to introduce myself better, some fun facts about me. I'm a Japanese Brazilian. I was born and raised in Brazil, but all of my grandparents are Japanese. That's a lot of people wonder, oh, do we have Japanese people in Brazil? Yes, we do. And they look almost like me. They're nicer, but well, that's what we got today. I'm also a Java champion and a Microsoft MVP, the JDConf rockstar, and my Twitter handle you can see in the top of the screen is @Yanaga. And I talk a lot about Java, DevOps, microservices, Kubernetes, Azure, of course, Quarkus. So that's a hint. Yeah, maybe you should be following me because I share a lot of content that should be interesting to you if you're watching this session. But enough of slides because this session is all about sparking joy, and this is a live code session. So let's move to the other screen that I have here today. So what we're going to try to do, we're going to create a new project using VS Code, and I want to deploy it on Azure, in particular on the Azure Red Hat OpenShift service. So if you just Google these names, you just search for these names, you can Bing these names too. You can go to Azure Red Hat OpenShift. And if you ever try to deploy a Kubernetes or a cluster, or try to deploy an AKS service or go to any other provider, you know it can be quite complicated. And I was surprised by how easy it was for me to deploy an OpenShift cluster on Azure. And if you go through the docs here, you will be redirected to this particular page. There are some commands that you just have to copy and paste. The most complicated one is the one that you have to log in into your Azure account. So I hope that you'll be able to figure it out by yourself. And you just enable some things which I had enabled beforehand in my accounts. And there's also a lot of optional steps. To be honest with you, I didn't run any of them. I just copy paste. I went straight to the point. What is the stuff that I have to copy paste and make it work? So I just copy pasted these commands, and it might take some time. Yesterday I was provisioning this cluster and took me approximately 35 minutes. So after 35 minutes, you will have your OpenShift cluster running on Azure Red Hat OpenShift service. And the nice thing about this cluster is that it's jointly managed by both Microsoft and Red Hat. So you have any issues with your cluster, with any workload that is running over there, you don't have to wonder, oh, do I have to ask Red Hat or do I have to ask Microsoft? No, you just open a ticket with Azure, and doesn't matter, we'll figure out how to make it work even better for you. So this is the command. You can click here, connect to your Azure Red Hat OpenShift cluster, because you will need those credentials. But luckily for me, I authenticated before. So here I have my Azure Red Hat OpenShift console running on the Azure platform. And if you go to the Azure console, you'll be able to see here, and go to the home, you can see the Azure services, you can see the OpenShift clusters here. And I have one cluster which is running since yesterday. I have my resource group, but if you're an Azure user, you're used to it. So what can we do with VS Code and Quarkus to quickly deploy an amazing service to this OpenShift cluster running on Azure? And again, Azure Red Hat OpenShift service. Internally at Red Hat, we call it ARO, but you can call it whatever you want. You just be sure to know that it's Azure and it's Red Hat OpenShift running on Azure. So I'll switch here to my VS Code. So let's see, I already installed, actually let me show you here. I have some extensions here on my VS Code. I can show here that I already have the Quarkus extension installed. I also have the Java. There are some Java extensions available, and I'm using the language support for Java provided by Red Hat. At least that's the one I'm using. So the Quarkus and Java extension, these are the ones that I'm going to use for this particular project. So if I type here Control-Shift-P, I'll be able to open and to trigger some actions. And the ones I want to use today is the Quarkus Generate Quarkus project. So I click here, and It's invoking, so it might take some time. Yes, first pick a build 2. I'm a Maven person because I've been known for bad choices, so I use Maven, but if you want, you can use Gradle too. And I need to type, this is the only boring part of the presentation. I need to type the group ID, which is going to be today com Red Hat developers. I need to type the artifact ID. Let me switch here. I'm going to type Spark Joy. And the version 100 snapshot, you can choose whatever you want. And the package name that I want to be created within my project. And the example resource that I want to be generated. Let's create a REST endpoint called hello resource. And that's all. I think I'm done. Added the JAX-RS extension, which will allow me to create REST endpoints. Hit enter, and now my project is ready to be created. It's asking where do I want to create that. Generate here in my default folder, and yes, my project is already open. Amazing, isn't it? I think it was super easy for me to generate my very first Quarkus project. So as you can see here, we generated some example resources, some example files. One of them is this hello world /rest-easy/hello. And how do we run this Quarkus application? And this is where the part of the magic begins. So I'm going to switch back here to my terminal. I'm going to enter this new project that I just created, Spark Joy. And I'm going to type the magic words now. Let me make it bigger just in case you want to see. I'm seeing here on the screen. The bigger the better, right? And mvn Quarkus :dev. This is going to start Quarkus in development mode. In this mode, Quarkus is going to listen for changes in the file system, and whenever I send a new request to my Quarkus application, Quarkus is going to restart, which means it's going to recompile all the dependencies. If you change it or pond.xml, Quarkus is going to download the dependencies, add to your project, and restart. So it's not really magic behind the scenes, it's just that Quarkus is so fast that you won't be even notice that this restart is happening. Okay, go back here. I have this hello world endpoint. Let me go back here to my browser and send a localhost 8080. And yes, my new cloud native application is ready. And let's see if my hello world endpoint is running. REST-easy/hello. And yes, hello is working. You can see it happening. So let me try to do some live coding here. Suppose that I don't want this hello endpoint to be returned because it's just boring. I could be returning instead of hello. Since I'm Brazilian, I'm going to return olá, which is hello in Portuguese. So I just saved the file, go back here to my browser, hit a refresh, and you can see that the reply is automatically there. And how long did Quarkus take to restart? Quarkus this time took only, let me try to find the number here. Quarkus took, oh, it's too wide the screen. Yes, now I can see it. Quarkus took 600 milliseconds to restart, but that's just because I'm doing a live stream today and my CPU is overwhelmed. But in a good day on my machine, usually Quarkus takes approximately 100 milliseconds to restart. So with Quarkus, we're not talking about minutes, we're not talking about seconds. With Quarkus, we're talking about milliseconds. And the joy of developing Quarkus applications is so big that I was developing some Node.js and JavaScript applications the past few weeks, and I can tell you that I've been spoiled by Quarkus, because after doing Quarkus, having to do JavaScript and save and refresh, Node.js was so slow. Quarkus is so much faster, which means that we have this amazing iterative feedback loop provided by the fast startup and restart of our Quarkus application. Okay, cool, isn't it? And I could be showing you a lot of other stuff, but what I want to share with you, of course, is how to deploy this particular application to my OpenShift cluster running on Azure. And remember, OpenShift is Kubernetes. OpenShift is the enterprise distribution of Kubernetes provided by Red Hat. And you know that since the beginning, if you go to the GitHub repo of Kubernetes, you can see that from the top 6 contributors of Kubernetes, 3 are Red Hat employees, and 2 of them are Google employees. That's how committed we are to the Kubernetes project, and we're doing a lot of things behind, and a lot of people love OpenShift because of the amazing developer features that we do. And if you tie these developer features with the Quarkus deployment features to Kubernetes, you'll be even more amazed. So we just developed this simple project. Let's try to deploy that to OpenShift. How can we do that? Let's do this the productive way, the easy way, the fast way, which is by adding a Quarkus extension. And you know, everything that you deploy to Kubernetes requires what? Requires a container. So we're going to need to generate a container image. Thanks to Quarkus, it's super easy, super fast. We also would need to create some YAML files, and nobody should be editing YAML files by hand. A machine should be doing for us, because you know, YAML has a lot of like a significant white space, and you don't want to mess your YAML file just because you had like a wrong annotation. Let a machine generate that for you. Let some software generate correctly for you. So what we're going to do, we're going to try to add some extensions. So I want to create a container image. If you want to create a container image using Quarkus, you can pick between the Docker container image extension, or you can use the jib one. It doesn't matter. Quarkus is going to generate optimized and secure images for you with both options, just for the sake of being like common, because I know most of people know Docker, but jib works very well, maybe even better. I'm going to use the Docker extension here to generate a Docker image for me locally. I'm also going to use the Kubernetes extension. So the Kubernetes extension will allow me to generate my Kubernetes YAML files automatically for me. And if you ever played with Kubernetes before, you know that you need to be a good citizen in a Kubernetes environment. Your application might need to create your health checks, which means you need to provide your liveness and readiness probes. Luckily for us, we don't have to do anything because Quarkus can configure everything for us, the code, the application, and the YAML file. So I'm just going to add another extension called health, small right health, and that's it. Let's keep it simple. I'm going to add only these three small extensions, and you can see that the Quarkus extension for VS Code is just invoking Maven, and you can see here by the emojis that are green that everything went well. What else can we do? Let me switch back here to my terminal. I'm just going to briefly stop Quarkus in development mode. I know you love it, I love it too, but we need to deploy this to production. So if I just run a package here, Quarkus is going to try to generate the image using some defaults. But since I want to publish this to another repository on the internet, I would have to go back here to my application and configure my application properties file. So there are some properties that I would need to provide. For example, I would need to say to Quarkus and container image dot first, I need to say that the group ID that I want to publish is Yanaga, because that's the name of my group repository in my container registry. My Quarkus, if I type it correctly, container image dot registry. So I can deploy to any Docker registry, any container registry available. I will deploy it to key.io. We pronounce key, but you can say quay, doesn't matter, as long as you use it. And what else? I want to also container image dot name. The name of the image is going to be Spark Joy, because that's all that we're doing today. We're sparking joy with Quarkus, Azure, VS Code, and Red Hat OpenShift. Oh, what else? I think it's enough for us. I just configured these properties. It's enough for me to build an image and publish to my container registry. So what can we do? We just have to run a Maven build. So I'm going to do a Maven. Let's clean just to make sure. I'm going to package. I'm going to skip the test. Sorry, don't do this at home, but Quarkus generates automatically an integration test. And since I changed the hello string is not hello, it's hola, now the test would fail. And I can add some parameters. I could have added them to the application properties file, but I want to configure when I want to build the container image and when I want to push it. So I'm just going to type these properties, container image dot build equals to true, and true, if I type correctly again, Quarkus container image dot push equals to true. So with this command line, I want to build an image and I want to push it to my registry. So let's run it. And of course, everything takes longer when you're watching it, when you're doing some live streaming. And I'm trying to just talk over what is happening. But you can see, if you ever create a Docker container, you can see that, yes, Quarkus is already sending the Docker commands here on the logs. And you can see the from, is copying, is sending the arguments. And yes, already pushed. So we built our Java project. We create a container, we push it to our registry in just 22 seconds. And if we inspect our target folder here, you'll be able to see that we also have now a Kubernetes folder. Let's see the contents of this particular Kubernetes folder. I have a Kubernetes YAML and a Kubernetes JSON file. It's a matter of taste, but let's try to see what's the content of this Kubernetes YAML file. When we do, you can see that Quarkus already generated for us. Here I have a service, which we'll be able to later to expose our service, and we have a deployment, Spark Joy. And let me scroll here. Remember that we added the health extension. You can see here on my screen that Quarkus already added the liveness probes of my application. And Quarkus also automatically created the liveness probe. And here in the bottom, you can see that Quarkus already created also the readiness probe. And of course, we could add some custom liveness and readiness probe. Just in case I added a JDBC database driver, Quarkus would add the readiness probes to my database connection. So a lot of things are automated for you, so you can have the best of all the worlds if using Quarkus when running your application on top of Kubernetes, and in particular, even better, OpenShift. Okay, and that's it. That's all we need to do to deploy to our Kubernetes and OpenShift cluster running on Azure. So first, let me see if I'm authenticated. Yes, OC is the command line for OpenShift, OpenShift client, and it's a superset of the Kubernetes client. But since I'm logged in, I can use the standard kubectl command line. So if I want to deploy this application to my Azure OpenShift service, let's create a new namespace, new project, JDConf. Already exists, already created beforehand. So we just have to apply this one. Apply -f target Kubernetes YAML file. So yes, service created, deployment created. So if I switch back here to my browser, and if I go to my OpenShift cluster, you can see this beautiful console showing you a lot of stuff. Let's go here on the left side of the screen, switch to deployment, and you can see that my deployment called Spark Joy is already running. If I click it here, you can see that I have one pod and it's already working too. If I can scale it up, for example, I can ask, well, let me add one more pod. Let me add a second, a third. I can also configure a lot of different stuff, but we don't have time for that today. Let's keep it one instance. It's still scaling up. And when this pod is particularly ready, you see it will be all dark blue. So the container was created. It's running, but it's not ready yet. When it's running, everything will be blue. Okay, so I have two instances of my pod particular running. Awesome. Okay, let's scale it down. Try to save some resources on this Kubernetes cluster, and I'll try to use another feature here, which is if I get kubectl get services, I have a Spark Joy service. The easiest way for you to expose an internal Kubernetes service to outside with OpenShift is to use an OpenShift root. So for me to expose this service, I just type expose service Spark Joy, and I can now kubectl get root. You can see that I have this particular endpoint. And if I go back here to my browser and try to access that, you can see that yes, my new cloud native application is ready. But if I go to hello /spark rest easy /hello, yes, it is returning hola. You can see that my application is deployed successfully on top of OpenShift. It was seamless, was super easy, super fast, and it's already there. What else can we do to provide for you to run your applications on top of Kubernetes and OpenShift? Did you ever wonder, well, I have a lot of dependencies running already on top of Kubernetes, and maybe I want to develop my application locally, but I want to run my application and use the Azure services that are available inside my Kubernetes cluster. So I don't want to spin up a Kubernetes cluster, an OpenShift cluster on my machine, because maybe I don't have enough RAM, and there are a lot of external dependencies, databases, message services that I don't want to be running locally because it consumes a lot of resources. So maybe it's a nice approach if I could, well, maybe just wondering if I could use this amazing development feature of Quarkus where I just save and everything is automatically there, but can I do that remotely inside my Kubernetes OpenShift cluster? Luckily for us, We can. Let's try to use the remote development mode inside the Kubernetes cluster using Quarkus. For this to happen, what do we have to do? We have to go back here to my IDE and type some additional properties. These additional properties are, first, I'm going to say package.type instead of jar. I'm going to use a mutable jar, which will allow Quarkus to update our jar remotely and dynamically. And we also have to say Quarkus live reload feature. The password is going to be SparkJoy because you don't want anybody messing with your application inside your cluster. So yeah, you should pick a better password. And we just need to tell Quarkus, well, on your Kubernetes environments, we need to create a new environment variable called Quarkus launch dev mode, and it needs to be equals to true. So your remote Quarkus application will know that it will need to listen for changes provided by my local machine and update this application dynamically inside my Kubernetes cluster. And I think I did everything correctly. I just type it here, and to make it work, we just need to go back here to my terminal and try to rebuild this particular project. So let me get it here from the history because I don't want to waste your time. And npm clip package, skip the test, container image build true, and container image push equals to true. Let's hit enter. This time maybe it will be faster because some of the layers are already cached. So it'll be, again, a seamless experience. So yes, we are already building, it's pushing. Oh, it's pretty fast, you can check that. And you can tell that it's live, it's not recorded, so I'm not speeding up anything. And again, in 20 seconds, my image is already there. We had some changes in the Kubernetes YAML file. So all we have to do is to apply those changes in the Kubernetes YAML file again. So that's what I'm going to do. kubectl apply -f target Kubernetes, kubernetes.yaml. The service was already created, the deployment was already created, but now it was updated with that particular environment variable. So if I get kubectl get pods, yes, my application is already running. Let's see if it's really running. I'm going to switch back here and I'm going to refresh, running on the browser. Yes, it's still running Hola. Well, nothing new, correct? Well, that's where the magic happens. I'm going to go back here to my terminal and I'm going to type the magic string, mvn Quarkus remote dash dev d Quarkus live reload URL, and I'm going to point to my application running on Azure Red Hat OpenShift. So let's go back here to my browser. I'm going to get this particular endpoint without the rest easy hello, just the HTTP part, just the domain name. I'm going to go back here to my terminal, copy this particular URL. You can see that it's running SparkJoy, JDConf, ARO app.io, and hit enter. It's executing a Maven build again, and it's going to connect to my application running remotely inside my OpenShift cluster. It might take some time. Again, it's running remotely. I'm on the US East Coast, and my cluster too. Yes, it's already connected. It was faster, much faster than expected. I was expecting some glitches because I'm live streaming, but yes, it's already connected. Let's go back here to my browser. It's still running Hola, correct? And what if I get in my local VS Code? Instead of Hola, let's try to please our friends that speak French. I'm going to add some bonjour. And bonjour, JDConf, j'aime, I hope I'm timing correctly, j'aime Quarkus, et Azure Red Hat OpenShift. Okay, I've typed this. I'm going to save the file. I'm going to send a new request to my browser. And this is where the magic is happening. Quarkus detected, the Quarkus application running on Kubernetes detected that there was a change. They are connected through a tunnel. It asked my local machine, my local development machine, well, do you have any changes? Yes, we do. So we compiled the changes. We sent the changes over the network to my Kubernetes cluster, and I was able to update my application dynamically. How cool is that? I think it can't get much better than that. That's how amazing is your development, deploying, and updating your live coding experience when you're running Quarkus with VS Code and deploying to Azure, Red Hat, OpenShift. And that's what I had to share with you today. I know was a very fast session, very quick paced session too. Quarkus has a lot more features that definitely you want to try. I would strongly recommend you to go to the Quarkus website, quarkus.io, because you'll be amazed by the experience. And if I had the chance to just like tease you, I hope I sparked joy with you today, and I hope I convinced you that Quarkus is worth a try, and you should really try to use VS Code with the proper extensions, trying to deploy that on Azure, and of course on top of Red Hat OpenShift service.
All right, thank you so much, Edson. Appreciate that. That was really cool. I played with Quarkus already, and I love it. I love it so much. And now that you guys put together a VS Code extension, you're really pushing me to try again the latest versions. That's awesome. I got a question for you. Where is the meme from Mary Kondo in your slide deck?
Oh, yes, sorry. I had to cut it off because I thought that I wouldn't have time to explain. But he got the point, he or she, I don't know. And because Spark Joy, I stole from Maria Kondo, but she's a Japanese lady. Well, I'm a Japanese Brazilian. I thought I could, but Quarkus is all around. Well, why did I take this Spark Joy? Because there are some things in your Java life, like waiting forever for deploy, redeploy, start, stop, and consuming a lot of memory. These things doesn't spark joy. You just think and leave behind, and you only keep in your life things that spark joy, and Quarkus is one of them.
Awesome.